This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence. Compelling, flawed characters, ensemble casts, masterfully chaotic stories rooted in universal themes, visual innovation, technical competence, an overall strong vision, and auteur-like control. These are some of the characteristics that, in my mind, make Paul Thomas Anderson one of, if not the best director of the last 20 years or so. Before we get started, I think it's important to note that usually in the series I tend to feature directors who have undergone a greater change in the level of budget that they work with. With the exception of his early work, Anderson has mainly stuck to producing work around the $25 to $40 million range, and has never ventured into the realm of studio blockbusters. Nevertheless, let's take a look at 3 projects which have been made at increasing budget levels: Hard 8, Boogie Nights, and Licorice Pizza. In doing this, I hope to give a sense of the trajectory of his career, his approach to filmmaking, and how some of his methods of production have both remained the same and slowly shifted throughout his career.
I was way too young to be given the keys to the car, I think. I wrote it because I had to, because it just came out.
Anderson's interest in making films began in his childhood in the San Fernando Valley and continued throughout his teenage years. He would write, direct, and then film his ideas for shorts with his father's Betamax video camera. He attended Santa Monica College but quickly became disillusioned with film school when he felt his ideas and experimentation were discouraged and filmmaking was turned into homework or a chore. Instead, he started working as a production assistant on sets in LA and managed to cobble together $10,000 from a combination of money for college, gambling winnings, and his girlfriend's credit card to produce the short film Cigarettes and Coffee. He managed to cast Philip Baker Hall, an actor he greatly admired due to his work on Secret Honor, a film made by one of his greatest influences, director Robert Altman.
Yeah, it was based on stuff. I'd been working in Reno. I'd spent some time up in Reno, and I was coming off experiences there of watching old guys. I loved this actor named Philip Baker Hall, still love him, and I heard his voice as the character. I just started writing, and that's what came out.
He would continue this writing process throughout his career. Many of the films he would write were based on life experiences he had and set in locations that he would frequent or he had lived in. He took these experiences and places and created narrative arcs and settings with them. At the same time, he often filled in the characters based on actors that he wanted to work with and wrote the roles with certain actors in mind. Cigarettes and Coffee did very well. It got into the Sundance Short program. When Anderson decided to turn it into a feature-length film, he also got into the Sundance program in order to develop it. It was there that he secured funding for the feature version, titled Sydney, through Reicher Entertainment, all while in his early 20s. He was so young that some of the crew members on the set initially mistook him for a production assistant instead of the director.
You know, I just bluffed my way through directing. But you gotta understand that at that time, probably based on the success of Pulp Fiction and a couple other small independent films, there was a lot of cash floating around from these cable companies. So if you could make a movie for under $2 million, they could kind of sell it off piece by piece with just enough kind of genre elements and a couple cast names, and you could just go make your movie.
So, with an independently funded $2 million low budget, he set out to make the film by squeezing the production window into a narrow 28 days. He cast the film by scooping up some well-known actors on the tight budget and shot it all on location. Due to the tight schedule, they had loads to shoot, particularly for the casino scenes, which they had to squeeze into night shoots from 10 p.m. to around 8 a.m. the next morning. To shoot a lot in the small window, it helped that Anderson always had a very clear idea visually of how he wanted to capture the film, and no time was wasted with extraneous shots or deliberation. To execute the cinematography, he hired Robert Elswit, who at the time was probably the biggest named crew member on the project. They quickly found that they complemented each other and had similar visual sensibilities.
Paul doesn't need a lot of help in certain areas, but I understand his taste, maybe. So it's never a surprise. I mean, I kind of can anticipate what he wants to do for the most part. So. Oh, he always has a visual style before he starts. Always. I mean, it changes to some extent, but it's completely thought out. Nobody's more prepared. Nobody's really thought through pictorial style as completely as Paul.
This style included explorative camera movement, often done on a Steadicam, and slow dolly tracking. Elsewhere lit with moderate contrast ratios, exposed the actors well, and used hard light in a naturalistic way. Even though they both loved the look of anamorphic lenses, the producers prohibited it due to budgetary reasons. As a compromise, they shot Super 35 Kodak film stock with Panavision cameras and lenses in a 2.39:1 aspect ratio, an aspect ratio he would often use in his later films. Rather than giving loads of direction to performances, or manipulation as he called it, he tried to instill the feeling of what he wanted to the actors before production, and cast all the parts exactly as he wanted them. As the cliche goes, most of acting is about casting. When it came to editing, he worked with a similar methodology. He doesn't like cutting everything up too much and instead prefers to keep the performances intact and pull from limited takes. When he submitted his first 2.5-hour cut of the film, friction between him and the production company ignited over final cut. Reicher Entertainment cut it down, changed the music, titles, and even the name of the film to Hard 8. As a final compromise, the company said they would be happy to release Anderson's version of the film if he came up with the funds himself in order to finish it. So he used all the money he had from a recent deal he had signed for his next film, Boogie Nights, to finance post-production and cut it the way he wanted to, and agreed to give up the original title, Sydney. Paul Thomas Anderson used the modest budget to secure a solid cast of big-name actors to draw in an audience, produced the relatively small-scope story over a limited 28-day production window, saved money on production design and by shooting Super 35 with an experienced DP, and eventually won out the creative battle for final cut. Before we look at the next film, I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform that can be used to create a beautiful, functional website without needing any complicated web design skills, which is why I use Squarespace to make the website for this channel by choosing from their range of professional portfolio designs. Every filmmaker needs to have a website to show to their potential clients or collaborators. You can display your film work in one of Squarespace's video libraries, and can even create a private members area to gain control over who can access your content, a great new revenue stream for content creators or digital businesses. So head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/indepthcine to save 10% of your first purchase of a website or domain.
I think I went into my next situation thinking that the lesson I learned was to be paranoid, be protective, and don't trust anyone. And fortunately, I got to work with a great studio and a guy named Mike DeLuca who was able to see what I had gone through. He said, no, trust me and put your faith in me.
Let's backtrack a bit. Anderson first came up with the idea for his second film, Boogie Nights, when he was 18. He wrote and directed the Dirk Diggler story, a 30-minute mockumentary about the golden age of porn.
After doing the short film, I wrote it as a full-length sort of documentary, taking that kind of Spinal Tap approach, you know. But by the time I sort of finished that, that format had kind of been worn out and done many times, and just kind of figured, well, the way to do this is just kind of go nuts and just make it straight narrative. Eventually had a shooting script of 186 pages.
The eventual script looked at the rise and fall of a character in the 1970s porn scene and examined the idea of addiction, ego, surrogate families, and communities. Like Hard 8, he wrote the script with certain actors in mind, including performers that he worked with prior on Hard 8, and set it in the San Fernando Valley, an area he had grown up with and was familiar with. It featured an ensemble cast inspired by the work of Robert Altman.
Casting and writing are kind of the same thing to me, you know, because I write parts for actors that are my friends or actors that I don't know that I really want to work with.
With a buzz starting to go round about the script, and while in post-production on his first film, New Line Cinema came on board to produce with a $15 million budget and promised a more hands-off approach. As it was a lengthy script that was larger in scope and needed the casting of many well-known actors, the budget increase was still a bit stretched. After their positive experience on Hard 8, Elswit was again hired as his DP. Elswit remarked that from the first location scout, Anderson would outline the kind of shots he wanted. That detailed level of specificity helped them to save time and money, since it was a lengthy, ambitious film for its budget level. This vision was also important when coordinating and communicating some of the complex long takes that Anderson had in mind. The most famous of which was probably the opening shot of the film, where a Steadicam operator started on a ride-on crane, which boomed down, gave the operator a chance to step off, and then track characters into an interior, introducing the audience to the space and the world of the film in the first 3 minutes.
These long, complicated tracking shots are really fun to do. I think the actors love them. You know, movie acting is so sort of pieced up and chopped up. Very rarely is action called. Like 3 or 4 minutes later, their scene happens. You know, which is kind of fun for them. You know, to really act something through and let it breathe and let it happen.
Due to the arduous nature of the shot, the main Steadicam operator, Andy Shuttleworth, had a backup Steadicam operator, as they had scheduled doing this one shot over the entire night. Elswit lit the exterior scene with 2 strong, hard backlights and some smaller units, which were meant to mimic streetlights, which were metered at a stop of T2.8. Inside the club, his team rigged the lowest budget 70s style disco lights they could find overhead to keep all film lights out of the shot. This was brighter at T4. To maintain an even exposure across the different lighting levels, Elswit used a wireless iris motor to slowly move the aperture remotely, going from T2.8 outside to T4 as the camera moved inside. This time they had the budget to shoot with anamorphic lenses. They used Panavision C series and pretty much shot the entire film with 3 lenses, a 40mm and 50mm for wider frames, and a 75mm for close-ups. Anderson disliked heavy film grain, so they shot on Eastman 100 tungsten 35mm film stock, the slowest practical speed stock they could find. Like on Hard 8, Elswit liked to observe the natural light and then augment it with additional fixtures. To do this, he would take stills on slide film during the location recce's, which had a limited dynamic range, and therefore clearly showed what the natural light was doing. He'd then come in and accentuate the natural light by, for example, using large tungsten lights through windows for day interiors to mimic sunlight. Overall, the budget was spent on a large ensemble cast, recreating the 1970s period scenes in the film, over a longer production schedule with many scenes in a long script, which were shot innovatively with more extensive technical gear. After a career of producing almost non-stop critically acclaimed work, Anderson turned to the 70s and again the San Fernando Valley for his next idea.
I had a story that wasn't exactly mine, but it paralleled mine. You know, my relationship to Gary Getzman, who I don't know if any of you know is a producer. Gary grew up in the Valley. He was a child actor. When that didn't really work out, he started a waterbed business. The stories he told was an opportunity to enter into a world that I remember very well.
Again, the script pulled from his own experiences in a setting he was familiar with dialogue and characters written for specific actors, or first-time actors that he had in mind. Having worked many times with Philip Seymour Hoffman in the past, he turned to his son to play the role, who, although it was his first film, gave a more realistic, understated performance than Anderson saw in the other castings. This was paired with an on-screen chemistry with another first-time actor, Alana Haim, who Anderson had shot music videos for in the past. The long screenplay with its many scenes meant he needed a budget of around $40 million, which was supplied by MGM. In the build-up to the film, Anderson decided to shoot lots of tests, partly to find a look for the film and partly to see if the 2 leads had enough on-screen chemistry for the movie to work. This was a luxury that the higher budget afforded him, compared to Hard 8 that had to be shot in 28 days. During these tests, they also looked at different lenses and pushing and pulling different film stocks until they settled on the look they were happy with. After parting ways with Elswit after many films together, Anderson had developed an unusual way of working without a dedicated cinematographer. He, along with technical crew members such as his gaffer Michael Bauman, camera operator Colin Anderson, and key grip Jeff Kunkel, all put their skills into a giant pot and shot a project without having a director of photography as a department head. This worked due to the director's technical prowess and track record with his experienced team of collaborators. This was first done on Phantom Thread, which they shot in the UK, and then repeated on various music videos. However, when it came to shooting in the US, they needed to have an officially credited DP due to union requirements. So Anderson and Bauman shared the official credit of cinematographer, while they continued working in the same collaborative style as before, with Anderson providing a visual direction and his key crew offering their input and technical execution.
Because we're shooting in California, you're kind of required to have somebody as listed as the cinematographer. Versus when we were overseas, the workflow is it's a very collaborative environment. He and I kind of work very closely with Colin Anderson, who's the camera operator. They'll formulate a shot, the two of them will, and he and I will have done preliminary scouting and then talk about the lighting. On the day, we'll just kind of execute what the plan is.
Like with many of his films, they shot on vintage C-series anamorphic lenses from the 70s. After doing extensive tests, they chose a set of Cs, which included 3 different 50mm lenses, each with different characteristics, which they picked from depending on the situation or shot. Anderson has always been passionate about not only shooting on film, but even screening the dailies, the raw footage, projected using 35mm.
One of the things that we do is we do film dailies. We watch dailies while we're shooting. We have a space that we work out of that we can project film. It's it's the camera department. Like basically, department heads would come in and out. We use that process to figure out takes we're going to use.
Overall, Licorice Pizza's larger budget offered the director more time and resources to fine-tune his vision by doing extensive camera tests, location scouting, and tests with actors before stepping onto set. This resulted in a final film which utilized extensive shots with vast period-correct backgrounds, shot with a curated selection of technical gear, stunts, and an ensemble cast, which included some big-name performers. Certain aspects of Paul Thomas Anderson's way of working as a director have remained consistent throughout his career, such as writing scripts based on his personal experiences with ensemble casts, which are ratcheted up by chaotic actions, shooting on 35mm film, often with anamorphic lenses, working with a small, consistent crew, focusing largely on casting and then letting the actors do their thing, and creating innovative visual languages based on camera movement. However, the more established he has become, the more he has been able to take his time to create the films, with more extended production schedules and more time for testing and finding the look before production begins. After the departure of Elswit, his methodology has also shifted away from the traditional route of working with a credited cinematographer to a collaborative working style, where he leans on the expertise of his crew department heads. Despite these changes, his films always have a recognizable tone and style that ties them together, despite the genre, script, or subject matter of the film. Thanks to everyone for watching, and a special thanks to all the supporters of the channel on Patreon. Let me know down in the comments what other directors you'd like to see featured in this series. Otherwise, until next time, thanks for watching and goodbye.